Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Wednesday morning, talking tonight's 10-game slate around the association. Your daily quick reminder, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. That way you will get notified whenever I post a new video. Also, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button if you like the content that I am producing. It goes a long way to helping my videos find their way into the hands of others. If you happen to stumble across this video or it was shared with you and you're not already following me on Twitter, please make sure to hit that follow button. My Twitter handle at BrentHyden1 is in the description down below. While you're doing that, make sure you send me a direct message. You can find out how you can get access to my daily content, projections, Discord channel, and all that good stuff for a very affordable price. Without further ado, 10 games on the slate. Gonna dig in, gonna power through this. Feeling a little under the weather this morning, but hopefully that won't affect too much here. We have Atlanta at Charlotte. Charlotte 12.5-point favorites, 233 over under. Injuries, let me pull that up because I didn't have it in my notes. See, we're already off to a bad start. We have Alex Poythress is questionable. Tyler Dorsey is out. That's the only injuries we have at the moment for this game. Looking at the Atlanta side of things, John Collins, 23 points, 11 rebounds last time these teams faced off over on Sunday. Follow that up with 16 points last night in a win over the Miami Heat. Solid spot here for John Collins. I have a decent amount of interest in him here. Really good usage rate so far. Since coming back, 22.5% usage rate, 25.6% rebounding rate, 20% assist rate, so that's really positive to see. Charlotte's allowing the 7th most rebounds per game to power forwards. They're giving up 11.6 rebounds per game to power forwards. John Collins, a little bit pricey, 6,100 on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel. Obviously a better play on DraftKings, but he did show off his upside in this spot the last time these teams faced off. So solid tournament option on FanDuel, cash and tournament option on DraftKings for sure. Looking at Trae Young, 17 points, 10 assists last night against Miami. It's his 7th double-double of the season. Still shot 5 of 12 from the floor. Against the Hornets last time these teams played, 18 points, 5 assists, 5 turnovers, 6 of 18 shooting. Shooting continues to be an issue for Trae Young. Taking a look at his game logs over his last 6 games, shooting 33.8% from the floor. The assist numbers are really positive. The fact that he continues to take a lot of shots is really positive, and he is getting to the line a little bit. So I like Trae Young in tournaments just because there's so many really good cash game point guard options. He is a little bit underpriced, and that is appealing in the spot. But again, if the shot's not falling for Atlanta, it's going to be really hard for him to get those assists that really boost his floor. So just a tournament option for me here. Looking at the rest of these guys, Taurean Prince is a little bit underpriced across the industry. Unfortunately, Lloyd Pierce, as I've hammered home recently, continues to talk about how he's comfortable playing multiple wing players. If Taurean Prince doesn't have it going one night, he's going to roll Kevin Huerter out there or someone else. But it is promising to see over the last couple games. He has played over 30 minutes. It's a decent spot here for Taurean Prince, so I'm okay with him in cash at his price. Charlotte does rank 20th in defensive efficiency to shooting forward to small forwards on the season. 22% of Prince's possessions are on post-ups. Or on spot ups. Charlotte is allowing 1.08 points per possession on spot ups. They're also allowing small forwards to shoot 40.1% from the floor. So it is a pretty big boost to Taurean Prince. I like him in cash and tournaments for sure. Charlotte does rank 28th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards as well. So that's a pretty big boost to Kent Bazemore, who is really cheap over here on DraftKings. Coming off a couple solid games, really solid outing against Charlotte last time these teams faced off. 20 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, shot really well. Has played pretty well against Charlotte in 2 previous games, as you can see, averaging about 33.5 fantasy points against them. Kent Bazemore, 4,900 on DraftKings, really affordable price. 5,800 is a really solid tournament price for Kent Bazemore, but 4,900 is something that I would be considering in cash if you need someone in that price range. DeAndre Bembry is a perfectly fine tournament option. 4,200 on DraftKings, definitely a good tournament option there. 5,400 on FanDuel, that's just going to be a hard pass. Jeremy Lin, Alex Lynn, Dwayne Dedman, all these guys are just tournament plays if you need someone in their price range to fit your lineup. Flipping over to the Charlotte side of things, obviously, Kemba Walker in a very, very, very good spot here. Walker is 9,300 on DraftKings, 9,700 on FanDuel. Obviously projects to be a really solid play, as he does just about every single night, because he continues to be really, really good. He scored 20 or more points in 16 of 20 games so far this season. Hawks ranked 27th in defensive efficiency. 2 point guards on the season. It's more of a tournament play, but it is definitely a smash spot for him. Obviously has not just gone completely bananas in their 2 previous meetings, but 47 fantasy points last time out, 50 the first time these teams played. So Kemba Walker, someone that you can definitely consider in the spot. Lamb is still really, really solid option in cash and tournaments here. It does take a little bit of a production hit with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist being back. But, you know, he's still playing a ton of minutes, 30 and 37 over the last 2 games that Kidd-Gilchrist has been back. No, 37 in the last game. Kidd-Gilchrist was back. Still putting up really, really solid numbers. I'm going to continue to ride the hot streak with Lamb. 6,400 on DraftKings, 6,600 on FanDuel. More of a tournament option there. There is a little bit of a floor with Jeremy Lamb, but I still really like him. Batum is fine in cash. Continues to kind of disappoint everybody on a nightly basis, but still playing a lot of minutes, and it is a really, really solid matchup. 4,800 for Nick Batum in a matchup where he's averaging about 23 fantasy points per game is perfectly fine. 5,400 on FanDuel is going to be a fade for me there. Looking through the rest of my notes, Marvin Williams. I was on him last time these teams faced off. Really, really sneaky play here. Probably, I don't know if he's sneaky now, now that he's gone bananas in this matchup, but Atlanta ranks 28th in defensive efficiency to power forwards, allowing them to shoot 46.3% from the floor, 37.4% from 3. 40% of Marvin's field goal attempts are above the break threes. Atlanta allowing opponents to shoot almost 41% on above the break threes. Perfectly fine in cash. I think in tournaments I'm going to hop off if he looks like he's going to be popular. If there's not a lot of ownership on him, or not a lot of projected ownership on him, I'm fine if you want to roll him out in tournaments as well. Zeller's fine in cash. Continues to be a guy that you can comfortably expect to get right around 20 fantasy points with a little bit of upside at his $4,100 salary on DraftKings. 5K on FanDuel is, again, fine in cash, but not really appealing. Malik Monk is very, very interesting here. Has been playing significantly better recently. If you look over at his game logs, actually went off against Atlanta last time these teams faced off, but over 20 minutes, back-to-back games. Shooting a little bit better recently, over 20 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3, 39% shooting over the last 5 games compared to his 37% season average, 45% from 3. So that's really appealing. I like Malik Monk as a solid value play, has really, really performed well against the Hawks the last few games. And then you can look at Tony Parker in tournaments as well. But that's enough on that game. Let's move on to the Knicks at Philly. Philly favored by 12 in this one. The only injury news we really have is Courtney Lee continues to be out, and Markelle Fultz is still away from the team. Looking at this, New York. David Fizdale continues to ride the hot hand at shooting guard. Last night it was Alonzo Trier. 24 points to go along with 10 rebounds and 7 assists. He scored in double-digit figures in 3 straight games, including a season-high 25 against New Orleans last Friday. Fizdale is going to like I said, Fizdale's going to ride whoever the hot hand is. Right now, it's TRISTAN. That doesn't guarantee that he's going to get the run in this game. If he struggles, then he may only get 22 minutes like he did against Memphis. If he's out, shooting the lights out, then he's probably going to get, 30 plus minutes like he did in 2 of the last 3 games. He's fine, especially on FanDuel, where he's only 3,700. You can just punt with Trier and hope that he continues to ride the hot, or continues to be hot. It's not really a great matchup for a whole lot of these guys. The Sixers do give up 44.4% shooting in the mid-range. They allow 1.11 points per possession to spot-up shooters. That's a pretty big boost to Trey Burke, who shoots 52% of his shots in the mid-range and is spotting up on 15% of his shots. 4,900 on DraftKings. I'm okay with that in tournaments. 6,100 on FanDuel. You're just fading that. He is only 6 of 31 over the past 3 games, so that's a little bit concerning. But again, really, really solid tournament option in this spot. Philly does really struggle against power forwards, 29th in defensive efficiency. They're giving up 24.2 points, 13.7 rebounds, 49.4% field goal percentage. It makes Noah Vonleh someone that I have interest in. Vonleh continues to be a guy that performs whenever he's on the floor. It's just a matter of him staying on the floor, staying out of foul trouble. I don't think he's going to struggle with foul trouble going up against Wilson Chandler. I'm going to be hopping back on the Noah Vonleh train tonight. I think this is a really, really, really good spot for him. 5,700 on DraftKings. I like that price more. For cash and tournaments on FanDuel, where he is overpriced at 6,700, just a tournament option here. Enes Kanter has averaged 1.37 fantasy points per minute against Joel Embiid over his past 4 meetings. Great tournament option here. Continues to be a guy that has monster upside. Still playing a lot of minutes over his last 3. Still producing really, really, really well. I absolutely love Enes Kanter in tournaments. Outside of that, you could look at Tim Hardaway Jr. Again, just always going to be a tournament option. Just way too reliant on his shot falling. Whenever his shot isn't falling, he is probably going to have a really low floor. He's 13 of 46 from the floor over the last few games. It has been promising that he has been getting to the line a little bit, but still not someone that I have a ton of interest in the spot. Flipping over to the Philadelphia side of things, obviously Joel Embiid, one of the top options on the slate. I absolutely love him in cash and love him in tournaments. Joel Embiid has been going absolutely off recently. He's notched 3 30-10 games in his last 4 and he has registered 13 30-10 games already this season. That is absolutely insane. Perfectly fine in cash and perfectly fine in tournaments. You're basically locking in someone that has 45 to 50 plus fantasy point upside every single night. 11-2 on DraftKings, 11-1 on FanDuel. Still projects to be a really, really, really solid play here. The Knicks also really struggle against power forwards. That actually has me a little bit interested in Wilson Chandler as a cash punt option on mostly DraftKings, where he's 3,600. He's 4,500 on FanDuel. You can still do that. Wilson Chandler, not a guy that has a ton of upside, but he's really cheap, and he, in this type of matchup, playing 30 plus minutes, should be able to get you 20 plus fantasy points. So Wilson Chandler, a perfectly fine value option here. Just not really, really good GPP option because he doesn't really have much of a ceiling. 50% of his shots do come from 3, where Knicks are allowing opponents to shoot 36.1% on the season. The Knicks' lack of rim protection is a really, really big boost to Ben Simmons. They're allowing opponents to shoot 64.9% at the rim this season. We know Ben Simmons, a guy taking a ton of shots at the rim. Looking at his shot profile, 67% of his shots come at the rim or in the paint, where the Knicks are allowing 42.2% shooting. Absolutely love Ben Simmons in cash and tournaments here. I think this is a really, really, really good spot for Ben Simmons. Cash tournament viable on both sites. It doesn't really matter. His price is $9,500 on FanDuel. I'm still fine with that. Jimmy Butler is fine in tournaments. Not someone that I have a ton of interest in, even though he is a little bit underpriced on DraftKings. JJ Redick continues to be one of the safest cash game options on a nightly basis. Just so super consistent. If you look at his game log, He's going to get you in the mid 20s most nights, 25, 30, 21, 26, 30, 20, 36, 31, 22, 26. Just so freaking consistent. I love JJ Redick in cash tonight, especially on DraftKings. Moving on, Utah at Brooklyn. This is a game we have to have some interest in with Donovan Mitchell already being ruled out here. And we also have, of course, Karis LeVert being out. And Damari Carroll is questionable in this game. So that's something to keep an eye on. Make sure I put Mitchell being out in my notes. Utah really struggling recently. They're 2-6 over the last 8 games. They're giving up an average of 110 points during that stretch. That's a little concerning. They have been just really bad. That's been with Mitchell and without Mitchell. It's really, really weird to see them struggle this much. But looking at that side of the game first, obviously Rudy Gobert. It is just a monster smash spot for Rudy Gobert. Nets are giving up a league high 65.5 fantasy points per game to centers. They rank 28th in defensive efficiency to centers. They're giving up 46 rebounds per game, giving up a ton of second chance points at 16.4. Rudy Gobert on the road this season averages 15.8 points and 12.4 rebounds. Not a huge believer in home road splits, but it is definitely something to at least keep an eye on. He's been playing much better on the road. I love Rudy Gobert. 7,700 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. Going to be a guy that I am building around tonight. The rest of this team, obviously, you love Ricky Rubio in the spot. 1.07 fantasy points per minute, but a 45.3% assist rate. We've seen Rubio in games that have been able to stay close go absolutely bananas without Donovan Mitchell. This game, 42.5 fantasy points, or 42.7 fantasy points. That there was a Memphis game where he just went completely bananas. Not this one, but one before that. I absolutely love Ricky Rubio in cash and tournaments. Probably going to be a core option for me tonight. Brooklyn's pick and roll defense is really bad. Their mid-range defense is really, really bad. Are giving up 46% shooting in the mid-range, where Rubio's taking 39% of his shots. So Ricky Rubio, someone I have a lot of interest in. Favors and Crowder both continue to be really, really consistent cash game options. Two guys that I am perfectly fine with taking here. 4,800 on DraftKings, 4,600 for Crowder. Looking over at FanDuel, 6K for Favors on FanDuel. That's probably going to be a pass. He does have some cash appeal in this spot, but that's definitely just not a price I would really, really be excited to pay. Jay Crowder at 4,700 on FanDuel, a much, much better play there. Both C boost whenever Mitchell is out, and then Joe Ingles is perfectly fine in tournaments. Looking at the Brooklyn side of things, a little bit of an underrated spot for some of these Brooklyn players. Over the past 7 games with Karis LeVert out, D'Angelo Russell has posted a usage rate of 30.9% and a 47.8% assist rate, averaging just shy of 30 minutes. I think a little bit of that is dragged down by one game where he played was it the 24-minute game? Would be up over 30 if you take that game out. Just shooting a ton. If you look, 28, 18, 22, just taking a ton of shots. He's a guy with really, really, really high upside. The Jazz have struggled against point guards this season. They've allowed 45% shooting in the mid-range. 42% of his shots come in the mid-range. I love D'Angelo Russell. 7,600 on DraftKings, 7,700 on FanDuel. An excellent, excellent tournament option here. Looking at the rest of this game, I do really like Spencer Dinwiddie in cash. It is a really underrated spot for Spencer Dinwiddie. He's still playing a decent amount of minutes, still has 30-plus fantasy point upside. Just a cash game option because he is overpriced just a little bit. And Jared Allen, we like targeting Jared Allen against more stationary centers, not big men that are going to stretch the floor. Utah has struggled a little bit against centers on the season. Jared Allen in a very solid spot here for tournaments as well, coming in at 5,500. Moving on, Chicago at Milwaukee. This game is Actually, we're going to do Dallas-Houston first because there's a lot to talk about with this game. Let's look at the Dallas side first. Dennis Smith Jr. is questionable. Dwight Powell is questionable. Luka Doncic is questionable. Zhu Qi is out. Dirk is obviously out. Chris Paul is questionable. Gerald Green is questionable. And then we have Brandon Knight, Carmelo Anthony, and Nene, who are all out. They've been all out for quite a while now. Houston's 6.5 point favorites, 217.5 over under. Dallas has looked really, really solid this season. They started this season at 2-7, but they've gone 7-2 since. Harrison Barnes has been really, really helpful in them having some success recently. Averaged 24 points per game in the last two, shooting 10 of 15 from three-point range in those games. Not something you really expect to get from Harrison Barnes, but Harrison Barnes is one of my favorite cash game options on the slate. 6,300 on DraftKings. He is 6,400 on FanDuel. Projects to be a really solid cash game option. So I like Harrison Barnes a significant amount. Unfortunately, we kind of need to wait out the rest of the injury news because that's going to have a pretty big impact on how we attack the rest of this game. If Dennis Smith Jr. is out, that's going to be a little bit of a boost for Luka Doncic. It's going to be a big boost for JJ Barea, who would be a very, very solid value option on the slate. If Chris Paul sits, that's going to be a pretty big boost for Dennis Smith Jr., Luka Doncic, and JJ Barea. Unfortunately, it's just really hard to break this game down with all these freaking injuries, all these question marks. So I'll cover the guys that I feel comfortable in regardless of what happens with injuries, and if something changes, I will post in Discord. But Houston does lack rim protection. They're giving up 65.8% shooting at the rim with a 38.4% frequency. They also really struggle against the roll man. This is a really underrated spot, I think, for DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan takes 89% of his shots at the rim, operates as the roll man in the pick and roll in 25% of his possessions. I have some interest in DeAndre Jordan at 7,100. It is a perfectly fine spot for him. I mentioned Harrison Barnes. It is a little bit of a tougher spot for him, but he's still perfectly fine in cash. Wesley Matthews, someone that is really underpriced, going to play a ton of minutes, really needs his shot to be falling to have a lot of value, but if that shot starts falling against the Rockets tonight, he could be a very solid option. I prefer him in tournaments than as opposed to cash games, though. And then again, Luka Doncic is perfectly fine in cash and tournaments if he plays, gets a boost if Dennis Smith Jr. is out. Dennis Smith Jr. is someone that I would have a little bit of interest in if Chris Paul misses this game and DSJ plays, but he is dealing with a little bit of a wrist injury, and that concerns me a little bit. Looking at the Houston side, again, status of the injuries are going to pretty much dictate how we attack this game. If Chris Paul plays, he's perfectly fine in tournaments. Don't really have a ton of interest in him. Here, Dallas is actually really good against point guards on the season, but he's still someone that you can definitely consider. James Harden, 45.9% usage rate, averages 1.82 fantasy points per minute. You would be wanting to get a lot of exposure to James Harden if Chris Paul sits this game out, of course. The same goes with Eric Gordon. His price is elevated, but would be someone to get a lot of exposure to. Once again, if Chris Paul sits, he has a 25% usage rate and averages 0.8 fantasy points per minute without Chris Paul and Carmelo on the floor. Clint Capella is someone that I have interest in, more so if Chris Paul sits, but he's still a perfectly fine tournament option, even though his price is significantly up because he should play a ton of minutes to match up with DeAndre Jordan. Averages 1.27 fantasy points per minute without Chris Paul, 1.17 with Chris Paul. Dallas does struggle to defend the rim. That's a pretty solid boost to both Capella and Harden. I do like PJ Tucker a significant amount once again tonight as a value option. 37.7% of his possessions are spot ups. He's attempting 21% of his shots as above the break threes. Dallas allowing 1.26 points per possession on spot ups and 38.7% from 3-point range. PJ Tucker is someone that I think we can definitely consider in this spot if we get news that Gerald Green is out. That's just more minutes to go around. at the wing position. Now let's talk about Chicago and Milwaukee. Again, I will touch on more Dallas, Houston if need be, should we get the injury news that we seek. Chicago coming in this one, 14-point underdogs, 228.5 over under. We obviously have Lauri Markkanen, Chris Dunn, Bobby Portis, and Denzel Valentine all out for Chicago, and DJ Wilson is out for Milwaukee, as if that actually matters. Zach LaVine, 28 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists on Monday, averaging 25.7 points and is shooting 30% from three-point range this season. Zach LaVine continues to be a guy you feel pretty comfortable is going to get you right around that 40-plus fantasy point mark just about every night, 32% usage rate on the season. He's perfectly fine in all formats. He's just never a guy that I'm just going to be like locking in my lineups. He's just someone that if he fits, he fits. If not, he doesn't. This is a Jabari Parker revenge game. Once again, Jabari Parker, a guy that has been shooting extremely well recently, has been playing really, really well. 49% shooting over his last 5 games, 35% from 3. Playing a decent amount of minutes, taking a ton of shots. Minutes are probably going to come down just a touch with Chandler Hutchison being back. But this is a really, really good spot for Jabari. If you're ignoring the revenge game part, this is still a really good spot for Jabari. 37% of his shots come in the mid-range. We talk about Milwaukee getting torched in the mid-range. 45% or 45.8% shooting allowed in the paint. 44.9% shooting in the mid-range. Jabari Parker, 17% of his shots in the paint, 20% in the mid-range. That totals 37%. This is a really, really good spot for Jabari Parker. I like him in tournaments, someone that I'm probably going to be off of in cash games, but he still has upside. He did have a really solid outing against this team last time out, but that elevated price tag is rather unappealing. Wendell Carter Jr. continues to be someone that has upside, continues to struggle with foul trouble and not getting a ton of minutes, but Wendell Carter Jr. really, really cheap on DK, someone that I would have some tournament exposure. His price is finally coming down on FanDuel, but he's power forward eligible on FanDuel, and I don't have any interest in plugging him in at power forward. Holiday's averaged 35.1 minutes per game over his last 6, and he's averaging 35.7 fantasy points per game over that span. Justin Holiday, someone that I think we can feel really, really confident in tournaments because he's playing a ton of minutes, he's taking a ton of shots, just doing a whole heck of a lot for this team, getting rebounds, getting assists, torched the Bucks the last time these teams faced off. Only played 30 minutes, still had 38 fantasy points, shot 6 of 9 from 3. Only 17% of his shots come in the mid-range. Again, Milwaukee take mid-range shooters against them, but they're allowing so many three-pointers, 35.9%. They're allowing 35.9 three-point attempts per game. Right now, they're only allowing opponents to shoot 34.6% from 3, but that amount of open three-pointers that they're allowing, eventually that's going to come and bite them in the ass. 25% of his shots are corner threes, where they're allowing opponents to shoot 42.7%. I love Justin Holiday on DraftKings, 5,400. Very, very solid cash and tournament option. 6,500 on FanDuel. A little bit pricey, but still a really, really solid cash and tournament option there. Flipping over to the Milwaukee side of things, Giannis. 20 points, has reached 20 points in 14 straight games, averaging 26.8 rebounds or 26.8 points, 13 rebounds, scored 23 points against his team last time out. It's freaking Giannis. If you need me to tell you Giannis is a good play, then you probably need more help than I could provide for you. I love him in all formats. Perfectly fine option. It's just a matter of me not wanting to pay up for any studs tonight, so I'm probably not going to have any exposure to him. Looking at the rest of this team, I do really like Eric Bledsoe. It is a really solid spot for Eric Bledsoe. Obviously, Chicago's defense really, really bad, giving up 113 points per game. Malcolm Brogdon has scored at least 20 points in 5 of the last 10 games, 30 fantasy points in 3 straight. Malcolm Brogdon, a guy, continues to be overlooked, underrated by the industry. I really like Malcolm Brogdon in this spot. Someone that can get you some rebounds, get you some assists, get you some steals, can score. I love Malcolm Brogdon in this spot. Just still overlooked, way too cheap. 5,600 on both sides. Fantastic cash game option. He's like another version of JJ Redick. Really consistent. Consistently getting you 20 in the mid 20s or 30s in fantasy points. So great spot for him. I do really like Chris Middleton as well. Chicago's allowing small forwards to shoot 37.4% from 3. This is a really good spot for Chris Middleton. Someone that I really like here. He torched the Bulls the last time these teams faced off. Put up 53 fantasy points, went 2 of 6 from 3, 9 of 15 from the field, but 10 rebounds. That was really impressive. 8 assists. Someone that I have a ton of interest in. And then Brook Lopez is perfectly fine in tournaments. Maybe some brother versus brother revenge narrative for you there. Just shooting a little bit better over the last couple of games, but not really someone that I just have a ton of interest in. But Chicago has been just getting bludgeoned by opposing centers recently. Moving on, San Antonio, Minnesota. Minnesota 4-point favorites in this one, 218.5 over under. Your obligatory reminder that Greg Popovich has been talking about resting players, wanting to rest players, desperately needing to rest players. Didn't rest anybody last game. It's potentially going to happen here. Something to definitely keep an eye on. Interesting to note, obviously, Pau Gasol is out. That's the only real injury news we have at the moment. San Antonio, 9-0 this season when LaMarcus Aldridge scores 20 or more points. 1-10 when he doesn't. Going to be something that I am pretty sure Greg Popovich has picked up on. LaMarcus Aldridge, I think, is one of the better plays on this entire slate. 8,300 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. I haven't popped over to the projections recently, but he's one of the guys that I have a ton of interest in. Projects to be a really solid play. So does DeMar DeRozan. But LaMarcus Aldridge, someone that I'm going to be building around tonight. Minnesota, obviously, really bad against centers. 21st in defensive efficiency to centers. They've allowed 23 points, 14.7 rebounds, 56.7% shooting, and 45.5% from 3. Great cash, great tournament option, giving up a lot of second chance points. Just a really good spot for LaMarcus Aldridge. He's gone off against Karl Anthony Towns just about every time they've played. Over the last 3 seasons, he's eclipsed 40 fantasy points in 6 of the 8 contests, 6 of the 8 games they've played in. His last 2, 59.5 and 56.3 fantasy points. LaMarcus Aldridge, a core option for me today. The rest of these guys, DeRozan's been really inconsistent lately, but he's still a high usage option. 36% of his possessions come in the pick and roll. Minnesota's allowing 0.97 points per possession in the pick and roll. He does have 20 or more points in 8 of the past 9 contests, 16 games so far this season. Like I said, he's just been inconsistent in other parts of his game, and that has me off of him a little bit. Some of these games where he's not getting the rebounds or the assists really hurts his floor. But looking at the rest of this, Bryn Forbes, a solid option, pretty much all formats, both sites. Patty Mills he scored 17 points against the Bulls, 19 of 29 shooting, averaging 14 points over the past four games. Someone that doesn't have a monster ceiling, but at 3,900 on DraftKings and 4K on FanDuel, I'm okay with taking a shot on him in tournaments. And then also Rudy Gay. Let everyone down last game, but continues to be someone that is pretty consistent in his production and his minutes. Minnesota does rank 23rd in defensive efficiency to small forwards. So Rudy Gay is someone to consider in cash in tournaments. Looking at the other side of this, it's the same story just about every single night. Karl Anthony Towns, massive usage, a lot of production whenever Jimmy Butler is off the floor. Considering he's on another team, he's definitely not going to be wearing a Timberwolves uniform tonight. So Towns, someone that obviously gets a little bit of a boost. Unfortunately, he has also been just really, really inconsistent recently. Over his last 5 games, shooting 52% from the floor, 27% from 3, averaging 45 fantasy points. A lot of that is propped up by this game right here against Chicago, where he, took 23 shots, had 23 rebounds, double-digit rebounds in back-to-back games. That's promising. The assist numbers, I would like to see those come up. I would like to see the rebounding numbers come up. But like I said, he's just been really, really inconsistent in several of these games. It's caused his price to come down. I'm fine with him in tournaments. Not someone that I want to go with in cash because I think there's better guys in the 7K range. So, yeah, that's that for Karl-Anthony Towns. I do really like Robert Covington. Continues to play a ton of minutes. Shooting poorly over the last few games. A little bit better last game, obviously, but the defensive numbers are really, really appealing here for Robert Covington. Someone that I have a decent amount of interest in cash and tournaments. You can look at Derrick Rose. You can look at Jeff Teague. Neither guy jumps off the page as really solid options, but two guys that you can definitely consider. I think Teague went off in this game last time they played. Yeah, Teague had 27 real points. He's fine in cash. Both these guys fine in cash, going to play a decent amount of minutes, take a decent amount of shots. You're going to get right around 28 to 30 minutes for Rose, double-digit field goal attempts. They're just fine. They're not guys that I just have a ton of interest in. Andrew Wiggins averaging 6.7 points on 8 of 37 shooting over the past 3 games. He said he was going to shoot his way out of his shooting slump. It didn't happen last game. Maybe it happens this game. He's just going to keep on shooting, so you can take a shot on him in tournaments if you wish. Moving on, really appealing game here. Washington, New Orleans, 6.5 point favorites for New Orleans. 241.5 over under monster total for this game. We just saw it a couple days ago. Anthony Davis sat that game out. Dwight was out, and of course Elfrid Payton out. Dwight is already ruled out for this game. New Orleans ranks 29th in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season. John Wall continues to be a really, really solid option. 9,100 on DraftKings, 9,300 on FanDuel. Taking a look over at the projections, you can see a lot of Washington projects to be really, really solid plays. John Wall projects to be a really, really solid play in the spots. Had a really solid outing against New Orleans last time out. Only shot 25% from 3. Still had 22 points and 34 minutes. I really like John Wall in this spot. Only shot 8 of 16 from the floor. Just a really, really good spot for him. I think he's someone that I'm going to have a lot of interest in tonight. The rest of this team, Bradley Beal, continues to be super, super underpriced on DraftKings. 8K. It's coming up there. He should be about that 8,500 mark, though. 8,200 on FanDuel. This guy's getting you another guy where you feel pretty comfortable. He's going to get you 40 plus every single night with upside. Someone that I have a lot of interest in this spot as well. New Orleans does really struggle against corner threes. They're allowing 41.6% on corner threes. They're allowing power forwards to shoot 38.7% from 3. Otto Porter is still fairly cheap on DraftKings at 5,900. He's a little more appropriately priced on FanDuel at 66, but Otto Porter continues to produce really, really well since moving to the power forward position. He's going to start at the 4 again tonight. I'd like to see his 3-point numbers come up, but as you can see, he did hit 3 of his 4 3-pointers, 12 of 15 from the floor against the Pelicans last time these teams faced off. I have a lot of interest in Otto Porter in the spot. Really, really solid option in all formats here. Kelly Oubre is fine in tournaments. I guess maybe as a cash value if you need it. It just takes a hit being in that starting lineup, but can still have some really solid games if his shot is falling. Austin Rivers went off last time these teams played. Revenge game for Austin Rivers. 3,500 on DraftKings. I'm fine with taking a shot on Austin Rivers. 3,600 on FanDuel. You can definitely roll Austin Rivers out on FanDuel in cash or tournaments. I'm okay with him in tournaments on DraftKings as well. revenge game. So yeah. 16.4% of Morris's possessions are post-ups. New Orleans allowing 1.05 points per possession on post-ups. Morris averaging 16.3 points in 4 games off the bench compared to 9.7 points in his 15 games as a starter. Markieff Morris, a guy that gets a lot of usage, gets a lot of shots, really solid option off the bench. I really like him in cash and in tournaments. Still way too cheap on DraftKings. 5,100, 6,500. I'm still fine with that price on Markieff Morris on FanDuel. You can definitely roll him out. Same with Jeff Green. You can take a shot on Jeff Green if you so wish. Really cheap option here. Does have upside. On the New Orleans side of things, Jrue Holiday. I don't know how many times I'm going to say this tonight, but another guy where you just plug him into your lineup and you expect him to get you 40 plus fantasy points. 8,400 on DraftKings. I like that price on him. It is an excellent spot for Jrue Holiday. Looking at the New Orleans side on FanDuel, Jrue Holiday is 9K. I'm still okay with that price on Jrue Holiday. I do really like Etuan Moore in this spot. He profiles to be a really good option here. Guy that can hit from the corners. Washington allowing 44.7% on corner threes, 38.9% on above the break threes. 29% of all of his shots are 3-pointers. They also struggle against spot-up shooters. Etuan Moore, really cheap, 5K on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel, someone that you can definitely get some exposure to. Has been pretty good over his last 6 games. 25 fantasy point averages, shooting 50% from the floor and 40.9% from 3. Anthony Davis, smash spot, of course. Washington giving up 47.6 rebounds, 15.5 second chance points. Not really going to have anybody that can defend him. So Anthony Davis, perfectly fine in cash in tournaments. I just don't want to pay for any studs tonight. Mirotic is fine in cash. Mirotic is fine in tournaments. 6,900 on DraftKings, should be over 7K. He's 7,700 on FanDuel. I'm still fine with that in cash. And Julius Randle, someone that you can definitely get some tournament exposure to, and the spot should be able to smash in his minutes off of the bench. Moving on, Cleveland at OKC. OKC 13-point favorites, 216 over under. George Hill, Sam Decker, J.R. Smith, Kevin Love, and David Nwaba all out for this game. Cleveland really short-handed. Terrence Ferguson, Hamidou Diallo are out for OKC, and Nerlens Noel is questionable. Sexton's perfectly fine in cash on DraftKings and FanDuel. Doesn't need to do a whole lot to pay off that salary. I don't really have any interest in Chetty Osman now that Nwaba has been ruled out, and Chetty is probably going to move to the 3. If they do start someone else and start Chetty at the 4, I'm fine with taking a shot on him in tournaments at 4,900 and 5,200, but only if they're going to start him at the 4. Most likely, Larry Nance starts in this spot. Nance played 38 minutes last game. Does take a little bit of a hit being in that starting lineup with Tristan Thompson. I actually pulled it up earlier. He averages 0.94 fantasy points per minute, and a negative 5.5% usage and negative 3.93 fantasy points per 36 minutes. That's a 36-minute sample size that we're dealing with. But for a guy that's going to probably play 38 minutes again tonight, really tough to get away from Larry Nance in cash and tournaments. Gonna be super chalky though, really chalky. So if you're wanting to fade, have no issue with it. Clarkson and Korver, GPP options. Korver always has potential to go off. I don't hate taking shots on Kyle Korver, especially on like FanDuel at 3,800. And then Tristan Thompson, very bad matchup, but going to play a ton of minutes to match up with Steven Adams. He's fine in cash. Tristan Thompson has been really good recently. So yeah, this game is pretty straightforward. Russell, if you want to play Russell, way underpriced, I think, in this spot, especially on DraftKings at 10.9. I feel like he should be, an 11.5 player most nights, coming off a Really poor shooting game against the Nuggets. Shot 6 of 23 from the floor. Still put up 50 fantasy points. He's triple-double upside every single night. Cleveland lacks rim protection. They're allowing 69.3% shooting at the rim. We know Russ, a guy that can get to the rim with the best of them. 54% of his shots come at the rim. I love Russell in all formats. Adams has taken 78% of his shots at the rim. I absolutely love Steven Adams in cash and tournaments. 6,700 on DraftKings, 7,400 on FanDuel. Unfortunately, there's still some centers that I like a little bit more. Paul George price is back up a little bit where it's not terribly appealing, but he's another guy. Looking at his game logs, even with Russell being back, he's going to play a ton of minutes, going to take a ton of shots, get you those defensive numbers. He's perfectly fine in cash. So is Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant's a guy, I think the crowds have started to kind of move off of him. He's really pricey at 5,600 on DraftKings or on FanDuel, but DraftKings 4,300. Guy that's has cash game appeal, playing a lot of minutes. So Jeremy Grant's someone that I have a lot of interest in for cash games. Moving on, last couple of games of the night. Orlando at Portland. This game is really appealing. Portland 7-point favorites in this one, 217.5 over under. Not a very high over under, but still a lot of interest in several pieces from this game. Nurkic is probable. Aaron Gordon is questionable. Seth Curry is probable for this game. Vucevic continues to be just an absolute beast. He's still underpriced on DraftKings, 8,300. Coming off another monster game, had 30 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists against the Warriors, has notched 30-plus real points in back-to-back games, leads the team in usage at 26.3%. They're making an effort to keep him involved in the offense. I absolutely love Vucevic. I'm probably building my lineups on DraftKings around Vuce and Gobert and just making the rest work. Portland is a stingy defense. They're ranked 5th in defensive efficiency. 2 centers, but he's still too cheap on DraftKings. Put up 24 points with 11 rebounds in a loss to Portland earlier this season. Portland is allowing 0.98 points per possession on post-ups. 25% of Vucevic's possessions are post-ups this season, so I like him a significant amount. Portland allowing opponents to shoot 38.3% on above the break threes. Jonathan Isaac, 26% of his shots are above the break threes. Terrence Ross, 42% of his shots are above the break threes. Terrence Ross has been playing really, really well recently. Pulling up his game log here. 28 points against the Warriors, 16 points against the Lakers, 18 points against the Nuggets. Torched this team last time out for 21 points with 4 rebounds. I like Terrence Ross, a guy that's going to play in the upper 20s, close to 30 minutes on a nightly basis, take double-digit field goal attempts. This is a pretty good spot for Terrence Ross. Love him in cash at his price. He is 4,800 on FanDuel, 4,400 on DraftKings. Perfectly fine in all formats. I still really like Jonathan Isaac. Portland just getting torched by small forwards, especially from guys that can shoot from 3. Not a guy that takes a lot of threes, but he does have plenty of upside in the spots. Had four blocks the last time these teams played. If he's going to play 30-plus minutes each night, 3,700 for Jonathan Isaac, way too cheap on DraftKings. 4,700 on FanDuel, you can probably fade him over there. The rest of this team, again, I mentioned Terrence Ross. He's perfectly fine. Jonathan Simmons, 3,200 on DraftKings. A really interesting tournament option if he gets the start again. Wesley Iwundu got demoted. I wonder why. Jonathan Simmons, perfectly fine as a tournament option on DraftKings at 3,200. 4K on FanDuel, perfectly fine as a punt option. Aaron Gordon, if he plays, you can roll him out in tournaments. He's a little bit underpriced on DraftKings. DJ Augustine, I'm not going to jump on that tonight. I think there's better places to look. And then Evan Fournier, second on the team in usage. Someone that you can look at, just not terribly appealing. 37% of his 37% of his field goal attempts are above the break threes. And as I mentioned, Portland allowing opponents to shoot 38.3% on above the break threes. So you can definitely look at Evan Fournier if you so wish. Looking at the Portland side of this game, Damian Lillard, It is Dame time once again. Lillard, one of my favorite options on the slate. 41 points in a win at Orlando earlier this season, averaging 28.8 points, 6 assists over his last 5 games. Really solid spot for Damian Lillard against a Orlando team that ranks 21st in defensive efficiency to point guards. Are giving up 24 points, 6.8 rebounds, 7.9 assists, 45.7% shooting, and 35% from three. They're also allowing 4.6 free throw attempts per game to point guards. That's a boost to Damian Lillard, who has been getting to the line a decent amount recently. I love Damian Lillard in all formats. Has taken at least 20 shots in 3 of the last 4 games. Plays a ton of minutes. He's also really, really good at basketball. Orlando getting torched in the mid-range. CJ McCollum takes 41% of his shots in the mid-range. Again, Orlando giving up 43.8% shooting in the mid-range. I do like CJ McCollum as a tournament option, as always. 7,200 on DraftKings. Pretty appealing. 6,800 on FanDuel. More appealing over there. You can look at Evan Turner. He's someone else that kind of lives in the mid-range. Takes a ton of shots in the mid-range, actually. 47% of his shots. You can get some Evan Turner in cash. Plays off the bench. Going to get you mid-20s in minutes. Probably get you 20-plus fantasy points. He is 4,100 on DraftKings, 4,400 on FanDuel. I'm fine with that in all form and cash. Aminu is someone that has struggled recently, 2 for 18 from three-point range over his last 3 games. But he's someone that I do have some interest in for cash games. Can get you some rebounds, get you some blocks, get you some of those defensive stats. So, Aminu, perfectly fine in cash. Nurkic expected to play in this game. 6,800 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel. I like him significantly more on DraftKings than tournaments, but a really fine tournament option here. Orlando does struggle against big men. They're giving up the 8th most fantasy points per game to them. I'm going to mention the Mo Harkless revenge game. That's all I'll say there. Zach Collins, you can look at in tournaments as well. Not going to play a ton of minutes, but did torch this team the last time they played. Went like 7-7 from the floor with like 4 blocks or some BS like that. Zach Collins. 2 steals, 1 block, 17 points, had 34 fantasy points in 17 minutes. Tournaments only there. Phoenix at Clippers. Only injuries to monitor of note in this game. Luke Richard and Bob Mute continues to be out, and Jerome Robinson. Slate breaking news: Jerome Robinson is out for this game. Looking at the Phoenix side of things, Devin Booker, prior to last night, had averaged 31.5 points on 50% shooting over his last 4 games. Great cash option in all formats. Decent matchup against the Clippers. It's Devin Booker. He's going to take a lot of shots. He's going to play really well most nights. It's Devin Booker. I don't need to tell you guys that. Clippers have struggled against big men. They've given up 15.1 second chance points and allow 1.03 points per possession on post-ups. 38.8% of DeAndre Ayton's possessions are on post-ups. DeAndre Ayton, a great mid-range tournament option at center. We know he has upside. The double-digit field goal attempts, double-digit rebounds in these games, really, really appealing. I like DeAndre Ayton as a tournament option. I think there's safer cash game options on the slate because DeAndre Ayton does have foul trouble from time to time, but he's still a really, really great tournament option. Trevor Ariza, someone that I have a lot of interest in cash and tournaments. Clippers ranked 19th in defensive efficiency to small forwards. They've allowed them to shoot 37.1% from 3. It's a pretty big boost to Trevor Ariza. It is a solid spot for him. He is taking a decent amount of his shots from 3. 61% of his shots come from 3-point range. The rest of them pretty much come at the rim. So I like Trevor Ariza as a really solid cheap cash option. 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. You can go with Trevor or TJ Warren if you wish. Not really someone I have a ton of interest in. And then McCall Bridges, a cash or a tournament value option to consider. Rashawn Holmes, I will say, has been really productive in limited minutes recently. 3,400 on DraftKings, 4,300 on FanDuel. This is mostly a DraftKings play, but the Clippers really, really bad against centers. Really bad against centers. They're giving up a lot of second chance points. They're giving up a decent amount of rebounds, 45.9. I think Rashawn Holmes at 3,400, someone that I think we could see one of these like 24, 25, 26 fantasy point games, but over 20 fantasy points and 4 straight, I have some interest in Rashawn Holmes here, someone that I think we can definitely consider, maybe even cash games as a value option. So yeah, flipping over to the other side of this game, Clippers very appealing here against the Suns. That starts with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm gonna see around 30 minutes each and every night. This is a really good spot for him. Phoenix ranks 27th in defensive efficiency to point guards. Phoenix is allowing opponents to shoot 67.7% at the rim. Gilgeous-Alexander, 38% of his shots come at the rim. I love him in cash and tournaments. He's really, really, really fairly priced across the industry. $5K on DraftKings, $5,600 on FanDuel. Going to be someone that I get a lot of exposure to. Probably going to be a core option for me here. Avery Bradley. Oh, it's really unappealing. Really unappealing to play him, but over 30 minutes in 3 straight games, over 20 fantasy points in back-to-back games. He's going to be matched up against a high-usage guy in Devin Booker, against a team that we know can turn the ball over a lot. Let me pull up what their turnover rate is right now. Let's see, on the season, Phoenix, 16.5 turnover percent. That's the second highest in the league. Avery Bradley, really, really solid value option in the spot, especially on FanDuel at 3,700. I would be getting some Avery Bradley as a value punt here. A lot of really good value punts on FanDuel tonight. So yeah, Avery Bradley, really good spot here. 43% of Tobias Harris's shots come in the mid-range. Opponents are shooting 44.6% against Phoenix in the mid-range. Tobias Harris, coming off season high, 34 points and 11 rebounds against Portland on Sunday. Won Western Conference Player of the Week honors. He scored at least 20 points in 12 games so far this season. Tobias Harris, really, really good option here. 8,400 on DraftKings, 8,400 on FanDuel. Perfectly fine cash game option, perfectly fine tournament option. Someone that I have a lot of interest in. I just don't know if I can pay for him tonight. Montrezl Harrell should continue to feast. Has just been so good recently. Playing 30 minutes off the bench, double-digit field goal attempts, double-digit rebounds. This is a smash spot for Harrell. Had over 20 real points in 3 of the last 4 games. Phoenix struggles against the roll man. 1.03 points per possession allowed to the roll man in the pick and roll. Montrezl Harrell, a guy that we love in matchups where against teams that struggle against the pick and roll, because he's operating as the roll man 24% of the time. I love Montrezl Harrell in all formats. And Danilo Gallinari, so that you can definitely consider as well, more of a cash game option tonight. But that does it. That's all 10 games. I made it through. I'm going to go drink some tea and try to recover from whatever this is that has me feeling like crap. But good luck in all your contests tonight, and I will be back on Friday.